Today's devotional is entitled Seasoned with Salt. Anytime you're watching a cooking show, there's always one thing that they always do. They season the food. Because you see, seasoned food is what wins competitions. It wins people over and makes restaurants successful. Salt can literally make or break a chef or a restaurant. And if a food is cooked completely perfectly and just done exactly the way it's supposed to do, but it doesn't have any salt, it's going to leave the people underwhelmed and confused. Like, they cooked this perfectly, but they didn't season it properly. But if you add the correct amount of salt, it's going to elevate those dishes to heights unheard of, and people will rave about it and even go all over the world to eat it. But on the same thought, adding too much salt can do the same as undersalting a dish. It can turn people off completely. One time with too much salt is enough to ruin reputation and end careers. You see, our words and actions are similar to a chef cooking a dish. If we just go through the day not adding anything to the conversations, not joining in those conversations when needed, people are going to probably avoid you or going to just ignore you. But on the same hand, if you overstimulate conversations like oversalting a dish, people are going to want to avoid you as well. That you seem to have an answer for every single thing, that you're going to be the resident expert no matter what the topic is. But having the right amount of salt in our words, people tend to want to listen. They will agree with what you say and remember exactly what you said. Because what we say and how we say it is so very important. And we see in Colossians chapter 4, verses 5 and 6, Paul is telling the church at Colossae how to interact with not only each other in the church, but to outsiders of the church. And he says, walk in wisdom toward outsiders, making the best use of the time. Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person. Speaking with words seasoned with salt allows us to respond not to just some people, but to every single person. And how you respond to a loved one should be no different than how you respond to somebody that you don't even know, or might be somebody that's just completely against you. You see, the words and actions we have come directly from our heart. And Jesus tells us that what's in our heart is what's going to come out in our actions and words. And we see in Luke chapter 6, verse 45, he says, a good person out of the good treasure of his heart produces good, but the evil person out of his evil treasure produces evil. For out of the abundance of the heart, his mouth speaks. Jesus is saying what's good is going to be what comes out, but what goes in as bad is going to typically mean that's going to be the same thing coming out. Our actions and words as Christians is a heart matter. And Jesus tells us that we're not of this world because of this, that our words and actions are different from those that are in the world. And we see in John chapter 15, verse 19, Jesus says, if you were of the world will love you as its own. But because you're not of this world, but I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. You see, not all conversations that we have are going to always be about God, Jesus, or even the gospel. But that doesn't mean that we still don't have to chat with a measure of salt in our words, that people will still listen and see our actions all the time and should always reflect that of Jesus. Because having your words seasoned with salt is going to allow people to know who you are. But it's also important that how we present what we know is just as important as how we say it. Knowing the gospel accurately and doing it with a measure of grace and mercy when we do share it. We see in 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15, it says, but in your hearts honor Christ, the Lord is holy. Always be prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you, yet do it with gentleness and respect. You see, not all of our conversations, like I said, are going to have to do with God, Jesus, or the gospel. But when somebody asks us a question, we need to do it with gentleness and with respect, regardless of how they're coming at us That is how we are to respond. See, knowing all the answers to the Bible, or even being an expert on things here, doesn't mean that you can just say things expecting people to listen to you. That being a resident expert on topics means I don't care what you got to say, I'm going to say it however I want to, and you're going to take it. No, we're still supposed to season our words with salt. Seasoning those words is going to allow you to know exactly what to say and when to say it, because that's going to go a long ways. You see, in Proverbs chapter 16, verse 24, the author writes, "Gracious words are like honeycomb, sweetness to the soul and health to the body." See, like I said, knowing when to respond and knowing what to say is just as important. Our words and our actions must be seasoned with salt. It is so important and so vital for us to know when to say something and how to say it, regardless of what people are bringing into us. Their words might be over-seasoned or not even seasoned at all, but we're supposed to respond with the measure of Christ. Respond with love. Respond with gentleness, with mercy, and with respect. So guys, as you go through this day, make sure that your conversations are seasoned with salt, that your actions are seasoned with salt, and people are going to respond in the same manner. That is our devotional for today, seasoned with salt.